Jules, you described him as a winner. And as you know, I am the original Tuchelista.
Yeah.
And I also want to talk in a minute about how he has changed over the years, because I think that is relevant to the conversation. Some people might say, okay, well, he's a winner. You say,
Mm-hmm.
I say, obviously with Mainz, you could argue finishing fifth, that is winning. And that was a tremendous, it was a long time ago. With Borussia Dortmund, he finished double digits behind in 2 years. He finished double digits behind Bayern both seasons. And look, it's tough, right? But Xabi Alonso did it. Um, he did win the German Cup knockout competition. Paris Saint-Germain, he won everything. Reached the Champions League final, won everything domestically. Most Paris Saint-Germain managers tend to do that
Mm-hmm.
because it is Ligue 1. At Chelsea, you give him a pass perhaps after the Bowley madness and all the instability of that season with Abramovich leaving and the sanctions and whatever. He won the Champions League in empty stadiums in COVID circumstances, which is still a win, right?
Yeah.
And at Bayern, of course, he won the league after nearly losing it. And then the second year, he finished 18 points behind off the top of the table. I believe that is the worst showing for Bayern since like 1992 or something like that, right? So describing him as a serial winner, if we,
I think
it depends where you put the.
I think when you win the Champions League, when you win league titles, you're a winner. I think he's a great cup manager, knockout competition manager, and for England and on international level.
Because of the two cups that he's won out away from Paris Saint-Germain?
Because on the season that Chelsea won the Champions League, for example, he beat Simeone and Klopp and Guardiola and Mourinho and everybody in those. If you just look at those matches in isolation, individually, so not over the season, not over 38 games in the league, on those games, which you can mention them as cup games, for example, he beat everybody. Zidane twice, Guardiola twice. It was him taking over Chelsea and what he did with that team at the time after Lampard, all the way to winning the Champions League against Guardiola in that final. COVID or not COVID, was outstanding. And for me, that's why in a World Cup environment, in an international level, he's a winner and he's got that winning mentality that can take England all the way.
I 100% agree with you, actually, on that point. That in a knockout context, he's phenomenal. I think tactically, he's as prepared as everybody. There is a legit, I think, concern, and he raised it himself, and we touched upon it. And I think it applies to every coach that goes from club management into national team management. You have less time to work. You know, you said he gets his players for 10 days. It's not 10 days of training, of course, because they have matches and they have travel. I would imagine they're going to have maybe any international break. You'll have 4 or 5 training sessions. I think I'm right in thinking that from the next cycle, but that might be after 2026, actually, that obviously you're going to have the longer international breaks with more games, but fewer breaks, obviously. That will be a huge adjustment for him. We don't know how that's going to work. I think he'll benefit from the fact that I think one of the age-old issues with England, and Southgate got around it a little bit because he was so likable, is that if at club level you're getting your instructions from Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp, and you go to the national team and you're getting them from Gareth Southgate, you might not listen as intently. But I think Tuchel has that gravitas.
Yeah.
So I think that's a positive. What I find interesting, going back to this cup thing, and his pragmatism, is I went back. There's, again, it's linked to it in my column, but there's this famous video where he gives like a TED talk and he's sitting there, and it's a much younger, it's when he was at Mainz, right? And he's sitting there and he's in a black t-shirt, and people watch this and they're like, oh my God, it's called The Rule Breaker, right? And he's so wise, he's so smart. And you go back and you watch it now, and it seems a little hokey, right? He talks about his relationship with players. He says, oh, every time I meet somebody, we have a rule at this club. We shake each other's hands and we look each other in the eye, and we feel good about working together. And then he talks about how he wants to enter the flow, because when you enter the flow, that's when you become the rule breaker. And I'm thinking to myself, this is kind of gobbledygook.
And this is 15 years ago, though.
Exactly. But this is what I'm talking about, the evolution. Right? And he talks about, he did 2 things back then with Mainz that he talks about quite openly, right? Which I cannot imagine he would do now. One is, one season, every single game, and people noticed that he kept changing his lineup. Every single game, he kept things very simple, he would just mirror whatever the opposition's formation was. And he would play like the opposition so that he turned everything into a series of one-on-ones. And I'm like, okay, that's not, that is the kind of message you send when you're weaker than the opposition. It was probably the right thing to do for Mainz. That's not something you're going to carry with you. And the other thing which he did, which I absolutely loved, is he didn't want his players to play the ball down the line and put in a cross. He wanted his players to hit diagonals. So what did he do? He redesigned the training pitches so that they would be diamonds. So that if you tried to hit it down the line, it would go out of play for a throw-in when they scrimmaged. Other times when he wanted them to play narrow, he redesigned the pitches to make them super long and super narrow. Other times when he wanted to play with width, the pitches would be short and very wide. This stuff seems hokey now. I'm sure it's not what he does now.
Yeah.
I would argue now he's developed into a far more pragmatic manager. We saw that. For me, I saw that at Paris Saint-Germain the most. I'd say that's where the transition came, right? Where the club still scored a gajillion goals, I think more than 100 goals and whatever. But you could see, especially the year that they went to European final, there was a solidity to the team, defensively especially, that wasn't there before. Under Unai.
Sure.
And that was under Unai Emery, by the way, not a bad coach, his predecessor.
Yeah, so I mean, he kept the 4-3-3 all along, so there was not many changes tactically, but certainly defensively, they were outstanding. I think the back three still would have his preference. I think that's the system that he's played the most through his whole career. So again, it's difficult to compare the Mainz time, the Dortmund time, the PSG time, the Chelsea time, etc., the Bayern time. But I think deep inside, that's probably why he would like. He likes 2 10s behind a lone striker, for example, which again we saw at Chelsea with the wing backs, whether they're very attacking wing backs, whether they're slightly more cautious wing backs. I think he can adapt to that. But I also think that if he looks at a squad and thinks, you know what, this is a squad for a 4-3-3, he would play. If it's a squad for 4-2-3-1, because you've got Musiala in your team that you can play as a 10, then you do that. So I think he's really capable of changing things very easily. And at international level, I think this is very important as well. But I'm really, really excited to see what he does. And I know we will have to wait a long time because he won't be involved in November, which is something also a bit weird. So his contract starts on January the 1st, 2025. So he's been announced as the England permanent manager, but they still have the interim guy who's going to take the next 2 games in November. And Tuchel will only start in March, really, the next his first games.
My understanding of that is that there's a financial piece to it in terms of the deal that they have with Lee Carsley.
Yeah, of course, but they're not going to change that. It's still a bit strange.
On that financial piece, it was written in there's a newsletter called FootBiz, which is very good, and they explained that basically the FA's budget is £20 million, for the 2-year cycle, or maybe it's a 4-year cycle, whatever it is, right? But 2-year cycle, I think. So he's going to be earning about £7.5 million in those 18 months. We think, right? Making just over $5 million a year.
Yeah.
Had they gone for Eddie Howe, they would have had to pay compensation. Howe might have made a little bit less money, or maybe the same as Tuchel, I don't know. But you also would have had to pay compensation to Newcastle.
Yeah.
So then and that would have been probably a minimum of $5 million, right? So that would have eaten up more into your budget.
Yeah.
So in some ways, they're giving themselves more flexibility here. And I think it seems mad to think that we're in a situation where money comes into it, and where Tuchel could be cheaper than, with all due respect, Eddie Howe. But I think that is part of the reality of this situation. We don't know. People are already speculating, and it's going to be fascinating. I agree with you that he's going to be pragmatic. He's not going to look at this and say, like, oh, look, Bellingham is now a number 10, Foden's a number 10, Cole Palmer's a number 10, let me play 3 number 10s, right? He's not going to think like that.
No.
He won't have the opportunity to adapt players into different roles because they won't have as much time to work together, which he might do on a club team.
Yeah.
Do we think if he does go 3 at the back, obviously he has a natural wing back on the right, potentially, in Trent?
Yeah.
Does he have one on the left?
I mean,
Are we going back to
potentially-
Bukayo Saka?
No. But I don't know if Luke Shaw, by the time
Yeah.
March comes over, he might finally be fit.
Is
And
Eric
then-
Dyer uncorking champagne? That somebody who
well,
really likes him is
I
back?
think it was more that last season at some point he needed someone
Yeah,
like
no,
him.
I'm joking.
He's not going to be mad, but it'd be interesting to see what he does. Like every new head coach in international level, who you call. We saw with Carsley that I thought outside of the box a little bit with Angel Gomez, or even Madueke. Madueke was in good form for Chelsea, so it made a bit more sense maybe. But so maybe Tuchel has a few ideas already. And again, between now and March, you would have had the time to watch a lot of games from England, previous games, from players who could be involved abroad in England. I expect to see him a lot at stadium watching potential England international who he would want to work with. And in a way, more than if he'd come in now for November, there's still time. There would be a month between this international break and the next one. But now, between now and March, there's even more time for him to almost settling in the job and see exactly what he wants to do. He can go and speak to players. He can talk to coaches of English clubs, everybody, really. And that's probably a good thing for him to be able to prepare so well for when March comes.
In terms of, obviously, I mentioned this before. This is somebody who's been fired from his last 4 jobs. And in 3 of those 4 situations, it was in mid-season. Although, obviously, with Bayern, he ended up sticking around.
Yeah.
I thought he was truly terrible at Bayern, like really, really bad. And you can say, well, Bayern, toxic environment, everybody except for Pep Guardiola and Jupp Heynckes feels like.
And even Pep felt that he didn't really succeed like he would have wanted.
Yeah, but at least he wasn't sacked.
Yeah, true. You're right.
But in the other situations, I think at Chelsea, I think he was doing a good job. I think he suffered personally and emotionally off the pitch a lot, and I think that really affected him. I would hope that there's reasons for that in his personal life, and as well as all the turmoil in the team. I would hope they looked into it.
Yeah.
Paris Saint-Germain. So the stock explanation is that Paris Saint-Germain, he fell out with Leo.
Yeah.
Over signings.
Over everything.
But what was Leo getting involved in his team selection or
Yeah,
well,
they just didn't agree on the direction for the team, the way the team should be playing, the leadership.
what did Leo not like about the way Tuchel was playing when he reached the Champions League final the year before and won the league, of course?
Yeah, I think, and Tuchel also is a very strong-minded individual that always says what he thinks. Very, very.
And Leo is a nice guy and very handsome as well.
But Tuchel would say, like, not rude, not in a rude way, but he would have a stronger argument and he's very, very bold in what he says all the time and very stubborn. So they were always going to clash at some point anyway. But on terms of style of football, that defensive solidity that you mentioned, which was very true, that I think there was a will maybe from the club to have a bit more of an attractive style of football.
Flair, yeah.
Especially when you've got players like Neymar and Cavani and Kylian and Verratti and all those kind of guys. So I think that was a point of disagreement between them. But I think Tuchel is probably the only manager to have been sacked after a 4-0 win at home in the league. I don't remember, certainly in big clubs, somebody being sacked after winning 4-0 at home.
It was
just
Christmas
before
too, right?
Yeah,
It was
just
his
before
Christmas present.
Christmas, Thomas. But because what is also interesting here, like you said, Gabby, before, the United job would come available at some point and he would be one of the contenders, right?
Not if he's the England manager at the time.
There's not
That,
now,
but I'm
before.
saying that this goes back to my other point.
No,
He's really backing himself.
No, but it's more than that. Is that the fact that he clearly chose England ahead of another club like a United or like somebody, because that offer would have come at some point for him.
That's to his credit.
Yeah, it is. But it could also be because this kind of toxic relationship that he's had everywhere, really. Everywhere. Not just in the clubs where he was signed, but everywhere. Maybe he's had enough of having somebody above him that he sees every day at the training ground, a sporting director, a CEO, a director of football, an owner, whatever you want to call it, who comes and doesn't have to interfere, but he's always there, always in the corner of his eyes, always behind him, always. And now there won't be any of that, because it's not the FA that are going to come up at St. George's Park every day of that international break, say, hey, TT, what are you doing today? What's the plan? What about him and what about that? And none. He will have that kind of freedom and and almost peace of mind. And maybe that's what he wanted after all those issues with Leonardo and Uli Hoeneß and Todd Burley and etc. etc.
Well, it's funny because in my mind, I drew an analogy. The only other person I remember in recent years to do something like this was Antonio Conte, when after being so successful at Juventus and falling out with, in his case, it was mostly players, he's let go. He can pretty much write his own ticket at that time. But what does he do? He decides to take the Italy job instead and takes over, unlike Tuchel takes over a very good England team, that Italy side that we would see at Euro 2016, for my money, the least talented Italy side in half a century, maybe more. And he did well with them.
Yeah.
But you are backing yourself because it's very easy to fall off the carousel. Just go ask Max Allegri about that. I mean, there's a lot of guys who are, I think Graham Potter's still looking for a job, lest we forget. So I think that is a credit to him. I want to end this. Look, we're both, in some ways, we're both like Tuchel, right? We're foreigners working in England. We've worked for English media. We still work at times for you certainly do more than me, but for English media. I think it's slightly different in football. I think grown-up countries in football, of the grown-up countries, of the historical powers, nobody has had, except maybe like in the dawn of time when only English people knew how to play football, nobody has had a foreign coach. Certainly not in the last 50, 60 years. There's some co-productions, Elenio Herrera a little bit with Spain, whatever, but it did jointly with somebody else in like 1960. It's seen as a blow to your pride. Out of the nations winning the World Cup, Uruguay, of course, has a foreign coach now, and they've had others before, but Uruguay is a teeny tiny country, right?
Yeah.
It is a blow to your pride. Now, England have already popped their cherry because they did it with Ericsson. I think the difference is Ericsson was seen as a sure thing, and Capello was seen as a sure thing. More sure things than Tuchel, right, when they took over. Because
what's sure things? What does that like?
Well, I think they were almost a guaranteed success on paper, or a more guaranteed success.
Sven-Goran Eriksson was a guaranteed success.
At that time?
Really?
Maybe you were, I don't know if you were here around the time, but the thinking about England is, we have world-class this, we have world-class that, and the only thing that's missing is the psychology of a winner. Eriksson, of course, been super successful, variety of different clubs. He's calm. The players respect him. He's got a winning mentality. He won the title at Lazio, whatever, right? Capello comes in. Capello, of course,
Capello more than Eriksson. Okay, but Eriksson, I know he won it with Lazio with an amazing team and an amazing squad.
But I think Tuchel doesn't come in. Tuchel is close to that, or it's the same thinking, that the gap between Tuchel and, with all due respect, Eddie Howe and Graham Potter. I actually heard that the third candidate was your friend Steve Cooper, and I was kind of shocked.
Okay,
Like, no, seriously, that would have been option number 3 after Howe and Potter. And I'm like, wow, really? These are the options at the top of the England game. But it strikes me that you're choosing somebody, and you're choosing a German too, and that matters because, listen, we joke about this, right? Germany are the gold standard in Europe. Every big European country, you ask them like, ooh, Holland, Dutch guys, who are your big rivals? Oh, Germany. In Italy, we think Germany are big rivals. I think we have 4 stars. They have 4 stars, so there's a reason for that. Holland with their no stars, whatever. England with their one little teeny tiny star, which he said he wants to double to take it to 2 stars. They see Germany as their rivals, and there's political and social reasons for that. Bringing in a German, you could understand how psychologically. You can't just tell me, oh, no, I don't understand why.
No, I do. I think I wonder if it's maybe time to move on from Germany, England, Second World War, blah, 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 etc. That's what I'm saying. Or the way I see it, I hear all your arguments. I can hear other arguments. I'm all for meritocracy in football or in everything.
Even with the national team.
Even with the national team.
You don't think
so yesterday on French radio, one of the guys said, I would never want a non-French coach for the national team. I said, oh, okay, no problem. So if Guardiola comes or Jurgen Klopp comes and wants to take over France, you said no. He goes, no, not them. That's different. Yeah. So what's the difference then? So I guaranteed you, had Pep Guardiola taken this job, none of Gary Neville, Harry Redknapp, all these English people would have complained about, I wanted an English guy. They would have said, "Oh, Pep, thank you so much. We have Pep Guardiola. Our national team is going to do." So, okay, he's not Guardiola. I give you that. But he's pretty good. Certainly better. Again, if you had a better English coach that had been snubbed or overlooked by the FA, I would have been, okay, I understand. But don't give me the there's good English coaches. Why didn't we go for one instead of Thomas Tuchel?
No, I don't think you use the argument there's good English coaches. I just, for me personally, obviously I'm Italian. If I were in charge of the Italian FA, I would not appoint a foreign coach. Even if he's much better, even if we have the Muppet Show and
So you would say no to Guardiola?
Yeah, I would say no to Guardiola. But I mean that is, I don't fault somebody else for doing it, because I think the national team should simply be an expression of your football. If you are a mature footballing
So Portugal
country,
are not a mature country. With the greatest player, one of the two greatest players of all time, they're not mature.
For my money,
So Roberto Martinez.
I love Roberto Martinez. I really like him.
Yeah.
Given the absolute amounts of talent that there are there's so many great Portuguese coaches out there.
Yeah, which is another reason.
They chose that. I'm saying I wouldn't choose that.
Because
but that's fine. There's some things you like. I don't like.
No, but the argument is England, at least they have nobody, so they had to go somewhere else. Portugal have an amazing school of forming coaches.
I would make the same. I would make the same. I think your national team should be an expression of your football and your FA. It's not just about winning with national teams, right? Especially if you're mature. You can, again, I can understand it more if it's the US, if it's Saudi Arabia, if it's these countries which are less mature, whatever. And maybe if I were Saudi or American, I would want a foreign coach, but I'm not. I'm saying, it's a failure, and I don't think it's worth a failure to go and chase a World Cup with a foreign coach. In Italy, we've had foreign coaches.
Disagree so much.
In volleyball, which is a big sport for us, who won Olympic gold and stuff, Julio Velasco, whatever. Well, you've had that success, but I think I think the national team should be something that really unites people, and there are people out there, and forget the punditocracy, who passionately feel that this is the wrong decision. This should go with a national coach. And
if people don't want to win, they don't want to win. I mean, there's nothing I can do for them. If they would rather Lee Carsley and being knocked out in the last 16 of the World Cup, no, I've got no issue with it. I just think that if you can get a top manager, unfortunately, who's not English for you, and you're still against it, I really don't get it. And I understand what you're saying. I think if you speak the language, for me, the language is the buyer. So England appoint a foreign coach who doesn't speak English, for example, I don't know why, but for example, then I would have an issue with Capello. I had more of an issue than Tuchel, for example, who coached in England, who speaks English, who clearly can identify himself to the Premier League or the English game, etc., even as a German. The language will be the only buyer where I think, okay, you can't appoint a guy who doesn't speak French for the French.
Who's sitting did okay with South Korea in 2002. I'm pretty sure he didn't speak Korean.
True, but you've just insulted South Korea by saying they're not mature countries. So, but yeah, I mean, certainly it's going to be a proper ride. And wait until he doesn't sing the anthem, by the way, for his first game.
Okay.
And then that controversy is going to explode.
I will make this very, very clear.
Yeah, but you will, but you know exactly what the reaction will be.
Yeah, there's two things. One is, I hope that the criticism towards Tuchel, you can criticize him because he looks a little bit like an insect. You can criticize him because he's losing his hair. Criticize him if his football's terrible, or if he says stupid things, or if he does the weird handshake thing with Conte or whatever, right? You cannot, I hope we don't get jingoism coming into this about him being German.
But you know he will. The question was asked yesterday already. He's not going to get...
No. I'm talking about below the belt stuff, not the concept of appointing a foreign coach.
No. About the anthem.
And on the anthem, okay, first of all, whoever asked that question, let me just tell you right now, Dumbaro, you're a muppet. Grow up, okay? But the anthem is not a reputation. The national anthem is not a reputation. Is not a representation of your football association. There's nothing to do with it. It's a representation of the country. It should be a representation of the country you belong to. Now, if you want to sing another nation's anthem, go ahead, knock yourself out. But to ask somebody to do that, I think is just absolutely appalling and weird, and to use that as some kind of gold standard, that's absolutely ridiculous.
But it was a controversy with Lee Carsley. It's going to be a controversy with Thomas Tuchel comes March. This is going to happen.
I hope. I mean, I think he said he hasn't decided yet.
But we know he's not going to sing it. Come on. I mean, it would be probably even worse if he was to sing
I remember years ago when Italy won a World Cup with Mauro Camoranesi, right? Who is the dude's from Argentina, right? He's
Yeah.
of Italian descent, but hey, he played for Italy, whatever. And he didn't sing the anthem initially. I think later he might have. And I'm like, this is so stupid. You're playing, you represent the football of a nation, you represent the FA of a nation. The anthem is not the anthem of the FA.
No.
It's the anthem of the country. I don't see how you would ever ask somebody to do that. And if you do that, you really are a sad person inside.